We found a child on your balcony and have taken them into custody for safety.
On a night when the harsh winter cold persisted, suddenly the doorbell rang. I stepped outside to find a policeman standing there. The air was cold, and the streetlight dimly lit the surroundings. The policeman had a serious look on his face. I was utterly bewildered, unable to comprehend what was going on. Especially since my daughter should have been asleep next to me in bed. Indeed, upon checking the bedroom, my daughter was sleeping peacefully. The child the policeman had brought was a girl around 5 years old. Her lips were pale and her small body was shivering with cold. The sight tightened a grip around my heart. This child is not mine. I don't know her. Despite my words, doubt lingered on the policeman's face. And he mentioned taking the girl to the hospital. The policeman seemed to prioritize the girl's safety, and I respected his sense of responsibility. The girl's hair was long and tangled, and her clothes were dirty and appeared unwashed. Although she looked about the same age as my daughter, she was quite skinny. Her face revealed an indescribable sadness. Who was this child? Why was she on our balcony? I had no idea at that point that a shocking turn of events centering around this girl awaited us. My name is Karen, a 32-year-old office worker. I live with my husband, a high school classmate, and our 5-year-old daughter, Mandy. We are a family of 3. We reside on the first floor of a condominium that our parents bought for us. My husband, also a company employee, frequently travels for work, leading a busy life. Even on weekends, he sometimes substitutes for his colleagues, and hence is rarely at home. One day, while my husband was away on business, and I was home alone with our daughter, the doorbell suddenly rang. Wondering who this child was and why she was on our balcony, my mind raced. The child seemed to be around the same age as my daughter, and I couldn't help but feel tightness in my chest, fearing she might be going through something difficult. I was so worried about this little girl that I barely slept that night, waiting for morning to come. As the morning broke and some time had passed, my husband suddenly called.
I'm on a business trip. Did anything strange happen?
Actually, last night there was an unknown little girl on the balcony, and the police came and took her to the hospital. It was really surprising.
Why didn't you take care of her?
But she's a stranger. I didn't know what to do.
You're a mother, dude. Handing such a small child over to the police is pitiful.
I couldn't hide my confusion at my husband's sudden anger. Amid a mix of surprise and bewilderment, I tried to understand the meaning of my husband's words. How did my husband know the child was small in the first place? I hadn't mentioned that. I posed this question to my husband, but his response was very vague, and he seemed to be choosing his words carefully.
Well, actually, that child is a friend's kid. Her mother is gone, and I felt sorry for her, so I brought her home yesterday. I was planning to ask you to take care of her.
But weren't you on a business trip? Why didn't you explain the situation properly? Thus, sudden circumstances stirred trouble between my husband and me. I pondered how to handle the unexpected situation, and the doubts about my husband's unanticipated actions. Consequently, mistrust was born between us, and I needed to figure out how to resolve it. Although my husband apologized, I couldn't believe he left a small child on the balcony in the cold. Even if she was dressed warmly, it was conceivable that she was shivering from the cold. So, what are you doing and where are you now? My husband said he was looking for the girl's mother, but I sensed he was hiding something. Later, after returning from his trip, my husband explained something to the police, picked up the girl, and unbelievably left her with me. Did you find her mother? What about her father?
No, I haven't found her yet. I don't know about her father.
By the way, who is this acquaintance?
Well, it's just a casual acquaintance. That's enough. I have another business trip for a while.
Wait a minute. What about this child? Ignoring my attempts to stop him, my husband left the house, leaving the girl behind. Feeling that my husband's behavior was strange, I began searching for clues among his belongings, and found something in the inner pocket of his suit jacket. Surprised by what I found, I hurriedly called my husband, but he was already unreachable. Suddenly realizing, both my daughter Mandy and the girl were looking up at me anxiously. Feeling the urgency to ease their anxiety, I knew I had to take some sort of action. "What's your name?" Even amidst this situation, I felt strongly that I had to do something. The suspicion towards my husband's strange actions and what he was hiding became a big issue in my heart. Naomi, who told me her name with a slightly nervous, anxious voice, also told me. She was the same age as my daughter, 5 years old. When I smiled gently at her, Naomi looked at me with a surprised face, showed a slightly relieved expression, and smiled back at me. However, that smile lasted only for a moment, as soon her stomach growled loudly. "Are you hungry?"
Here.
Smiling at Naomi's cute figure, I began to cook omelet for both my daughter and Naomi. While I was cooking in the kitchen, they were looking at the kitchen impatiently. Once the omelet ready, I brought the plates to the table, and Naomi stared at it curiously, then began to eat voraciously. Her mouth became all messy with ketchup. When I tried to wipe it off with a tissue, Naomi got startled and quickly shielded her head with her hands. This action seemed to tell something, and it weighed heavily on my heart. "It's okay, Karen. I'm just going to wipe your mouth." Speaking gently, Naomi turned her face towards me with a relieved expression. As I wiped off the ketchup, she began eating the omelet again. After finishing her meal, Naomi showed a satisfied expression. As I prepared the bath and helped her undress, I involuntarily gasped upon seeing Naomi's body. "What is this?" The sight before my eyes was unexpectedly painful. Countless bruises were floating on her skin. Trying not to show my astonishment, I composed myself inwardly. If I showed a worried face, Naomi would also become anxious. Smiling gently, I led her towards the bathroom. As I tried to gently wash her body, Naomi hesitated, and then,
"I can do it myself,"
she carefully said, and began to quietly pour water into the bath bucket. "Naomi, why?" As I asked softly, she looked back at me with a surprised expression.
"This is what I always do, you know."
You clean yourself with water only?" She nodded a bit shyly. I gently took her hand and began washing her body carefully with soap. After that, as I slowly put hot shower on her, Naomi's eyes sparkled brightly.
"It's been a while since I had such a warm bath,"
she murmured in a soft voice. And a sense of comfort overflowed on her face. Later, when I heard from her, it turned out that she rarely had the opportunity to take a hot shower at home. And her mother, Lena, said,
"Wash your body with water only."
Seeing her accept such a reality as a part of her ordinary daily life tightened my heart even more. After coming out of the bath, her dried hair became silky, and Naomi, who was dressed in my daughter, Mandy's clothes, looked truly radiant, as if she was a different person. Watching Mandy and Naomi playing in the yard through the window, I somehow felt a similar aura around them. Watching the two of them, it felt as if Mandy had found a sister, which made me smile. Naomi had straightforward eyes, and from her actions and expressions, it was evident how much she was seeking affection from the heart. While I was progressing with the cooking in the kitchen, she quietly came by my side and lightly tugged on the hem of my skirt. As I stopped my hands and, "What's up?" I asked, she smiled at me with twinkling eyes. As night deepened, she sat beside me, and during sleep, she wouldn't let go of my hand. On the other hand, my daughter Mandy also seemed to like Naomi very much, and I saw them playing together almost every day. Day by day, their friendship deepened, spending time together as if they were sisters by birth. However, as a week passed, there was no contact from my husband, and I began to feel anxious. I had heard that Naomi's mother was an acquaintance of my husband, but I knew I couldn't keep her at our home with just that information. Before concluding, I tried to contact my husband, but it didn't work out. And I also consulted with the police. Then, making a difficult decision, Naomi was sent to a child welfare institution. Watching her small back as she got into the institution's car, the tears dropping from her tiny eyes struck my heart. Thereafter, there was no contact from my husband. And amidst deep concern, I made a significant resolution. 9 years later, we were living peacefully in a quiet town, with my parents, my daughter Mandy, and Naomi. Actually, during the days following Naomi's departure from the institution, I had decided to accept her as a member of our family. My parents, who were spending time at their ancestral home, also held special feelings towards Naomi.
It was fate that Naomi became part of our family,
they said with words full of affection towards her. Mandy and Naomi spent their days together, strengthening their bond and growing into beautiful, mature women. Both stepped into the modeling industry, which was their dream, and now are being featured as the gorgeous sisters in many fashion magazines. Their activities evolved daily, and their eyes sparkled with a future promise. One bright afternoon, while enjoying a book in the quiet living room of my family home, the doorbell rang. As I slowly opened the door, there stood my visibly exhausted ex-husband, Kevin, alongside a woman I had never seen before. With a gentle smile, she introduced herself as Lena. Concerned about the neighbors' prying eyes, I invited them into the living room. As they settled on the sofa, amidst a tense atmosphere, they suddenly began to speak.
Actually, Naomi is my daughter.
It was a shock, having him appear out of nowhere after years of no contact and dropping such a truth. My astonishment was compounded by his calm demeanor, which was quite unnerving. I could see a resemblance in Naomi. And the woman next to you, is she Naomi's mother? He slowly nodded and began to elaborate on his past with Lena and their relationship. Their acquaintance started in a local bar he frequently visited, where she worked as a part-time employee. Despite knowing well that he already had a family, they grew closer. And eventually, Naomi was born as a result. However, due to his indecisive nature, Kevin procrastinated on divorcing me. On the other hand, Lena, overwhelmed by the new responsibilities of motherhood and exhausted from child-rearing, seemed to have run away from her role. In such a state, a desperate Kevin decided to leave Naomi with me. That alone was a shocking story, but more astonishing events were yet to follow.
Please, I want you to return Naomi to us.
Kevin suddenly stood up from the sofa and, taking a position to kneel before me, started to plead desperately. What are you saying all of a sudden?
Hey, seeing Naomi in the magazine really surprised me. She has become such a notable figure.
So, how does that affect anything? It has nothing to do with our lives, right?
But think about it, I am Naomi's real mother. Compared to that, you're just a substitute, aren't you?
After all these years showing no interest in her. And now you come here claiming this, it's unbelievable. Afterward, Kevin, maintaining a prostrated posture, slowly slid himself closer to my feet.
To be honest, we are facing a very difficult financial situation right now. We want to lean on Naomi's ability. Please, return her to us.
This is unbelievable. Relying on Naomi for livelihood. The very thought is wrong. I absolutely cannot accept this. Kevin raised his voice.
Hey, I'm humbling myself here. What are you thinking? Are you secretly reaping profits by using Naomi? So, honest workers suffer, huh?
I took a deep breath and answered. Kevin, if that's what you think, you are gravely mistaken. The money Naomi and her sister earn is saved in a dedicated account for them. And Naomi is as much a real daughter to me. I will never hand her over to people like you. Suddenly reacting to my words, Lena stood up from the sofa. Her eyes burning with anger, she raised her hand towards me. At that moment, Naomi rushed into the room and yelled,
Mom, don't go any further. Don't hurt my mom.
Naomi stood in front of Lena, glaring at her in a protective stance. Lena, slightly surprised, said,
Naomi, you've grown so much. Do you remember me? I am your real mother. So, come back with me, and let's live as a family.
However, Naomi, tears welling in her eyes, said,
I can't believe that someone like you is my mother. I want you to leave this house immediately.
She ran to me, tightly hugging me and starting to cry. Lena, slightly shaken, said,
Naomi, the memories you have, there might be some misunderstandings. After all, we were both young at that time.
I reacted to her words and took out a letter and a photograph that I had found in Kevin's pocket earlier and showed them to Lena. The letter clearly stated, parenting is hard for me. I can't feel love for Naomi. I've reached my limit, please take her far away. If you are not positive about marrying me, let's escape somewhere far away. Just the two of us. It was a desperate message. Furthermore, in the attached photo, we could see the marks of bruises all over young Naomi's body. As if to prove the cause of those bruises, a detailed medical report was also enclosed. I chose my words carefully and asked, even in front of these proofs, can you still claim to be conscientious parents? Although taken aback by my words, she replied in a way that seemed like an excuse.
That was something Kevin decided unilaterally. I didn't know about it. We were young, maybe we couldn't fully bear the responsibility of parenting. But even so, Naomi is our child. That's why I want her back.
I calmly rebutted. But Naomi and I have formally adopted each other. Legally speaking, I am Naomi's legal parent. She was shocked by this fact.
Is that really the case?
She raised a perplexed voice. Seeing Lena's reaction made my feelings even stronger. However, on the other hand, Kevin seemed to have not accepted the situation yet. And as a last resort, he proposed to me.
Then let's cut ties with Lena completely and start over just the two of us. Mandy and Naomi are my real children. Living together as a family like before should solve all the problems.
What the hell? Bringing up such nonsense at this time. Are you planning to act only for your benefit? That's absolutely unacceptable.
Listening to their argument, more than anger, feelings of disbelief and disappointment welled up inside me. I truly wanted to avoid having any further involvement with such ill-natured people. Wait a moment, Kevin. We are no longer in a marital relationship.
What are you talking about?
It's been 9 years since you disappeared. During that time, I proceeded with the legal procedures and our divorce has been officially recognized.
Why did you decide such a thing on your own?
As Kevin tried to attack me in anger, the sound of police sirens began to echo from afar. It seems my parents, sensing danger, had called the police in advance. As you can see, the police are here. Please don't think about coming near our house again.
Karen, please, I'll give up on Naomi. But could you help me out a bit financially?
In the end, Kevin displayed his pathetic figure. He and Lena were taken away in a turbulent manner. I planned to demand alimony from Lena and alimony along with child support from Kevin precisely. As they seem to be isolated from their close ones, more hardships likely await them in life ahead. Through numerous adversities and challenges, the girl who once trembled with anxiety has grown incredibly strong now. Every time I witness this change, my heart fills with boundless joy. When my daughters talk about the future they dream of, their eyes sparkle with hope. I sincerely wish for their dreams to come true. Alongside my beloved parents, and with my two tender-hearted daughters, I plan to spend each day feeling the joy of life.
My name is Ethan Walker. I'm the only engineer in the company, and at least until yesterday, I thought I had the kind of job security most people only dream of. I've spent 5 years building not just my career, but the entire technical foundation of the company. From day one, I became the go-to person for anything that needed to be fixed, developed, or improved. When you're the only one in a role that's as vital as mine, you tend to think that things are solid. You tend to think that no matter what happens, you're indispensable. That's exactly what I thought when I walked into the office yesterday morning. It was a regular day, the kind that starts with a hot cup of coffee and the sound of the team chatting about their projects. I sat down at my desk, plugged in my laptop, and prepared myself for another productive day. It was routine. Until my boss, Greg, called me into his office. Greg, the CEO, is a man known for his sharp mind and calculated moves. He's the type who always knows what's best for the company, at least in his mind. He's been the one to make the tough decisions, often stepping over others in the process. To be honest, I've never exactly liked him, but I respected his ability to lead. Or at least I thought I did. "Ethan," he said as I walked in, his voice unusually cold. "Close the door behind you." I did as he asked, but my mind started racing. This wasn't the usual check-in or status update. There was something off in the air, a tension I couldn't quite place. "Take a seat." He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. I sat, trying to gauge the situation. His eyes were hard, but his expression betrayed nothing. Just a blank mask. "I'm sorry to say this, but we have to let you go," he said flatly. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard him right. My mind raced to process what he had just said, but it didn't make sense. How could this happen? I had been a loyal employee, doing everything I was asked, sometimes more. "You're firing me," I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Greg didn't flinch. He nodded, as if he was explaining the weather. "The company needs to cut costs, and unfortunately, your position is no longer a priority. It's a business decision." I wanted to argue, to fight back, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I sat there, stunned, watching as he shuffled some papers on his desk, avoiding eye contact. It felt like the world had flipped upside down in an instant. The place I'd poured my heart into, the company I'd helped build, was throwing me away like I was nothing. "I'll make sure you get a severance package," he added, but it didn't comfort me. It only made the situation feel worse. A severance package wasn't going to make up for what felt like betrayal. I didn't say anything after that. I stood up, walked out of his office, and out of the building. The weight of the situation didn't fully hit me until I was sitting in my car, staring blankly at the rearview mirror. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but there was also a nagging question that lingered in my mind. Why now? I had no answers, only the bitter taste of injustice. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, and my mind kept circling back to the same question. Why? Why was Greg doing this? The company was growing, and I had been the one holding everything together. I could already see it, every piece of the work I'd done slowly falling apart without me there to maintain it. And yet, there I was, unemployed. Just like that. I pulled into the driveway of my apartment complex, barely noticing the faded parking lines or the empty spaces around me. I was numb. I had no idea what I was supposed to feel. Anger? Betrayal? Confusion? All of it, really. But most of all, I felt a sense of nothing. Like I was walking around in a fog, unable to find a way out. I parked and sat there for a moment, staring out at the buildings. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't move to check it. I already knew who it was. Mia. She'd been my girlfriend for the last 2 years. She was always there when I needed someone to talk to, someone to lean on. But today, I couldn't bring myself to call her. I didn't want to burden her with my mess. I stepped out of the car and walked into my apartment, a place that had never felt so empty before. I dropped my keys on the counter and sat on the couch, still staring blankly at nothing. It wasn't until I heard the soft buzz of my phone again that I snapped out of my trance. I picked it up, seeing Mia's name flash on the screen. "Hey," I answered quietly. "Ethan, you all right?" Mia's voice was full of concern, but there was something else in her tone, something I couldn't quite place. "I tried calling earlier, but you didn't pick up." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Yeah, I lost my job today." I said it so matter-of-factly, like it wasn't a big deal. But inside, it felt like the world was crumbling around me. "What?" she gasped, the shock clear in her voice. "Why? What happened?" I leaned back on the couch, trying to gather my thoughts. Greg fired me. Said they needed to cut costs, that my position wasn't a priority anymore. There was silence on the other end for a few moments. Then her voice came again, softer now, as if she was trying to tread carefully. "That doesn't make sense. You've been there for 5 years, Ethan. You built the whole engineering department. You've worked so hard." "I know," I replied, frustration creeping into my voice. That's what I thought too. But apparently, none of that matters now. I'm just replaceable. I could feel my chest tighten as the words left my mouth. I hated the way they sounded, hated the way I felt saying them. But there was no denying it. I was replaceable, like a cog in a machine that could be swapped out at any time. "Ethan, I don't know what's going on, but this doesn't feel right," Mia said. "You've got to do something. Don't let this slide." I ran my hand through my hair. What am I supposed to do? I've been loyal. I've given everything to that company. And now, I'm out. I'm worthless to them. What's the point? Mia paused. "Don't say that. You're not worthless. You just need to figure out what comes next. We'll figure it out together." But even as she spoke, I felt a sinking pit in my stomach. The truth was, I had no idea what came next. The engineering world was competitive, and the company I'd worked for had built its reputation on the very foundation I had helped to create. Without me, I wasn't sure how long they'd be able to hold things together. But it wasn't just about the job. It was the feeling of being discarded, the feeling of betrayal. Greg's words echoed in my mind. "It's a business decision." That was all he'd said. No explanation, no real conversation. Just a cold, calculated decision that left me with nothing but the aftermath. The days after my firing passed in a haze. I found myself applying for other jobs, but it felt pointless. How could I go back to another company when the one I'd invested so much in had tossed me aside so easily? How could I trust that anyone would value my work after this? My resume was solid, sure, but it didn't matter if it didn't come with the right connections. I knew the game too well. Without the right connections, I was just another name in the pile of resumes that recruiters sifted through. But what bothered me more was the lack of communication from Greg. No apology. No follow-up. No remorse. He'd had made the decision to fire me, but now that I was gone, it was like I never existed. One night, a few days after I'd been let go, I finally gathered the courage to text Greg. It wasn't a long message, just a simple, straightforward request. "Can we talk?" I hit send and waited. Seconds felt like hours. Then, finally, a reply. "I'm busy. Let's talk tomorrow." I stared at the screen, reading the message over and over again. It wasn't much, but it was something. I didn't know what it would accomplish, but I knew I needed to confront him. I needed answers. The next morning, I drove back to the office. It was strange, walking through those doors again. The security guard nodded at me as I passed, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. They all knew why I was there. They had all heard the news by now. I made my way to Greg's office. My heart pounded in my chest with every step. I had no idea what I was going to say, but I couldn't let this go. I knocked lightly on his door. "Come in," he called out from inside. I walked in, and he barely looked up from his paperwork. "Ethan, I didn't expect you back so soon. What's this about?" I took a deep breath. "I need answers, Greg. I don't understand why you fired me. Why now?" His eyes finally met mine, but there was no warmth in them. "I've already explained this to you. The company needs to make adjustments. Your position was no longer necessary." "Bullshit," I snapped, my voice shaking. "You've always known that I was the one keeping things running. You've known that for years. So why the sudden decision? Greg shifted in his chair, his posture stiffening. It's not as simple as you think, Ethan. There are things you don't know. Things that are above your pay grade. I felt a wave of frustration rising in me, but I held it back. I didn't want to lose control. I wanted answers. What do you mean? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Greg's eyes flickered for a split second, and in that moment, I realized something. He was hiding something. There was more to this than just a cost-cutting decision. Something wasn't adding up. The tension in Greg's office was suffocating. I stood there, staring at him, trying to piece together the cryptic words he'd just spoken. Things you don't know. Things that are above your pay grade. The phrase echoed in my head, gnawing at me. For years, I had been the backbone of this company, the one who made things work when they went wrong. And now, Greg was telling me there were things I didn't know. It didn't sit right with me. I had come here for answers, but all I was getting were more questions. You're not making sense, Greg, I said, my voice low, controlled. If my position isn't necessary anymore, why was I the one holding everything together? Why was I the one solving problems that no one else could even begin to understand? If it was just about the money, why didn't you tell me beforehand? Greg leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. He looked calm, almost too calm. Ethan, you've done your job well, but this isn't just about money. There are larger issues at play here. You're not privy to the decisions that are being made on a higher level. This was always going to happen. The words higher level hit me like a slap in the face. What did you mean by that? Who was making decisions about the future of this company? And more importantly, why wasn't I included in those discussions? I opened my mouth to say something, but Greg held up a hand. That's enough for now. You'll hear from HR about the severance. I'm done talking about this. I felt the coldness in his voice, and with it, the reality that this wasn't about my worth. It was about something much deeper. Something I wasn't part of. I left his office without another word. As I walked out of the building, I felt a shift in the air. Something was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that Greg's words were just the tip of the iceberg. I had been cast aside, but the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like I wasn't just collateral damage. I was a threat. I needed answers, and I couldn't wait for them to be handed to me. I had to dig deeper, even if it meant crossing lines I had never imagined. But where to start? The first person I thought of was Mia. I had to tell her what had happened, and I needed her support. But when I tried calling her, she didn't pick up. I shot her a text, but the hours passed without a response. Something was off. She had always been there for me, and now she was avoiding me. A few days later, I ran into an old colleague, Max, while grabbing coffee. Max had left the company a year ago, and we kept in touch occasionally. He wasn't involved in the higher-ups, but he knew the company's culture and the inner workings better than anyone else. Ethan, Max said, surprised to see me. I didn't know you were back here. What's going on? I could see the confusion in his eyes. Well, I'm not really here for work anymore. I was fired, actually. His eyebrows shot up. What? Seriously? Greg fired you? I nodded, feeling a strange sense of solidarity in his reaction. Yeah, he said it was a business decision, but there's something more going on. I don't buy it. Max looked around, making sure no one was listening. Listen, man, you're not the only one who's been in the dark. There's been a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes lately. I don't know all the details, but I've heard whispers about changes, big changes, that the execs are trying to make. And Greg, he's been under a lot of pressure. Pressure from who? I asked, my curiosity piqued. This was exactly what I needed to hear. Max leaned in closer. I don't have all the answers, but there are rumors about some shady deals with investors. People are worried the company might be sold soon, or worse, that it's being set up to fail. The words hung in the air between us like an explosive revelation. Shady deals. Set up to fail. That doesn't make sense, I said, trying to process the information. Why would Greg fire the one person who knows the systems inside and out if the company's in trouble? That's a huge risk. Max hesitated before answering. That's the part I don't understand either. But I do know this. There's something going on behind closed doors. Greg's been acting different lately, distant. And he's been making decisions that don't make sense. If you want to get to the bottom of this, you're going to have to dig deep. I stood there, my mind racing with possibilities. What Max had said confirmed everything I'd been feeling. There was more to this than just a simple cost-cutting decision. Greg wasn't just getting rid of me. He was trying to eliminate a threat. Me. I left the coffee shop with more questions than answers. I needed to get back into the company's systems somehow. I had to know what was really going on, and the only way to do that was by accessing the files, the data, the inner workings of the company I had once been a part of. But how? I wasn't an outsider anymore. I didn't have clearance to access sensitive company information. I couldn't just walk in and start digging around. I had to be smart about this. That night, I spent hours thinking about it. Then, it hit me. The server room. The one place no one thought to lock when I was working late. I had always been given access because I was the only engineer. I was the one who maintained it. I grabbed my coat and made my way back to the office under the cover of darkness. I knew this was risky, but I also knew it was the only way to get the truth. I had to know what Greg was hiding. I had to know who was pulling the strings. When I arrived at the building, I was met with an eerie quiet. The lights were off, the office completely deserted. My heart pounded in my chest as I made my way through the dark halls. The server room was on the other side of the building, hidden behind a steel door that no one ever paid attention to. I had the key card. I inserted the card into the scanner, and the door clicked open. Inside, the dim lights flickered on as I stepped in, the hum of the servers filling the room. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I moved to the main terminal, quickly bypassing the security protocols I had set up myself. I was in. What I found on the screen made my blood run cold. There were financial transactions, large sums of money being transferred to offshore accounts, contracts signed with shell companies, and the names of high-level executives I didn't recognize. Shady deals. Max had been right. Greg wasn't just protecting the company. He was lining his pockets at everyone else's expense. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't just about me. It was about everything the company stood for. Everything I had worked for. Greg had sold us all out. The sight on the screen was everything I had feared and more. As I scrolled through the files, the weight of the realization hit me hard. Greg wasn't just trying to save the company or make some cuts to improve the bottom line. No. He was playing a dangerous game, orchestrating a web of financial deceit with the sole goal of lining his own pockets. The offshore accounts, the shell companies. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, buried beneath layers of paperwork and transactions. I couldn't look away, even though I knew the truth was darker than anything I had expected. My stomach churned as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. I had trusted Greg. Hell, I had respected him. And now, I was seeing the man I thought I knew for what he really was, a fraud. But what was I supposed to do with this information? I felt a rush of anger surge through me, followed by a wave of cold fear. My first instinct was to take everything I had found and expose it, to confront Greg and make sure everyone knew what he had done. But as the adrenaline surged, I realized how dangerous that could be. If I went public with this, I would be stepping into a battle that could ruin me. Greg had connections, people who could make sure I was silenced for good. I knew this wasn't just about exposing him. It was about surviving this. I stood in the server room, paralyzed by the weight of the decision before me. My hands trembled as I scrolled through more files, each new discovery deepening the pit in my stomach. This wasn't just a matter of vengeance or retribution anymore. It was a question of justice, yes, but also one of survival. Greg had been ruthless, but I couldn't afford to make the same mistake. I had to think smarter than him. I had to play this game with the same precision he had used to manipulate everyone around him. I heard the soft buzz of my phone in my pocket. The vibration broke through my thoughts, and I quickly pulled it out, fearing the worst. Mia. I hadn't heard from her in days, and the text I saw now made my heart skip a beat. Ethan, we need to talk. It's about Greg. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What does she know? Was she in on this? Did she know about the offshore accounts? I couldn't bring myself to trust anyone right now, least of all Mia. And yet, I knew I couldn't ignore her either. I needed information. I typed out a quick reply. I'm in the office. Meet me here in 10 minutes. As I waited for her to arrive, I paced in the server room, my mind racing. I was at a crossroads. Exposing Greg could ruin him, but it could also destroy my future. If I exposed him now, the fallout would be immediate. The company would likely implode, and I would be the one left holding the pieces, with no career left to salvage. But if I stayed quiet, if I kept this information to myself, I would be complicit in his crimes. I would be just another person who looked the other way when the truth was right in front of me. It was in that moment that I realized something important. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't take action. I couldn't walk away and pretend like everything was fine. This wasn't just about saving my own skin. It was about doing the right thing, even if it meant putting myself in danger. Mia arrived a few minutes later, her footsteps echoing in the hallway outside the server room. She knocked softly before entering, her face full of concern as she saw the look in my eyes. "What's going on, Ethan?" she asked, her voice shaky. "You're scaring me. What's this about Greg?" I gestured to the computer screen, my voice tight. I found it. Everything. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the money he's been siphoning off. It's all here. Mia's eyes widened in shock, but she didn't say anything at first. She just stared at the screen, processing the gravity of what I had uncovered. "Oh my God," she whispered, stepping closer. "Ethan, this is huge." I looked at her, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on me. I know, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. If I expose him, he'll retaliate. He's powerful, Mia. He has connections I can't even begin to understand. She looked at me, her eyes filled with fear, but also something else, determination. "You can't just let him get away with this. You've worked too hard, Ethan. He doesn't deserve to win." I shook my head. But what if I can't win, Mia? What if exposing him ruins everything for me? I'm not sure I can risk everything. I've already lost my job. I can't afford to lose more. There was a long silence as Mia took in what I had said. Then she stepped closer to me, taking my hands in hers. "I know you're scared, but you can't let fear control you. What you have is power, Ethan. You have the truth, and that truth is more powerful than anything Greg can throw at you. You have to fight for what's right." Her words struck me like a lightning bolt. She was right. This wasn't about me or my fears anymore. It was about standing up for something bigger than myself. It was about making sure that people like Greg didn't win, that the people who cared about the company, who worked hard every day, weren't crushed under the weight of greed. I stood there for a moment, feeling the full weight of the decision I was about to make. And then, I made up my mind. "I'm going to do it," I said, my voice steady, my heart pounding. "I'm going to expose him. I'm not going to let him get away with this." Mia squeezed my hands, her expression filled with both relief and fear. "You're sure?" I nodded. "I have to be." But as I said the words, I knew the storm was far from over. Exposing Greg would set everything into motion, and I had no idea where it would lead. The consequences would be dire, and my life would never be the same. But at that moment, something shifted inside of me. I wasn't just fighting for my career anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for justice, and for everyone who had been affected by Greg's treachery. The days following my decision felt like a blur. After Mia and I made our plan, I went to work assembling everything I had: screenshots, files, contracts, emails. Everything I had uncovered in the server room. The weight of each piece of evidence felt like a brick in my hands, but I was resolute. I wasn't backing down. I had considered every option: going to the police, going to the media, or even confronting Greg head-on. But in the end, I chose the most direct route. I couldn't risk things being swept under the rug, not again. So I reached out to a lawyer. Someone who had experience with corporate corruption. Someone who could help me navigate this without getting destroyed in the process. The lawyer, Peter, didn't take long to respond. He had seen cases like this before. Companies caught in financial scandals, executives trying to cover up their wrongdoings. But what set this apart was the scope of Greg's betrayal. It wasn't just a matter of a few questionable transactions. This was a full-scale operation built on deception, money laundering, and embezzlement. "You've got a strong case here, Ethan," Peter said after going over the files. "But be prepared for the fight of your life. This isn't going to be easy." I nodded, fully aware of the battle ahead. But as the words left his mouth, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I was ready. Ready to fight, not just for myself, but for the integrity of everything I had built and everything I had worked for. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Peter guided me through the legal processes, carefully making sure that everything was airtight. We gathered more evidence, connected with a whistleblower who had worked in the finance department, and prepared a report that would be hard for anyone to dismiss. The timing had to be perfect, and I couldn't afford any missteps. Meanwhile, Greg was none the wiser. He was still walking around the office, still acting like nothing had changed. The smug confidence that had once irritated me now made my blood boil. He had no idea what was coming for him. And then came the day. Peter and I had set everything in motion. We had scheduled a meeting with the board of directors, one that Greg would be present at. We had the evidence ready, the documents in place. This wasn't just going to be about Greg's firing. It was going to be about holding him accountable for everything he had done. The meeting room was tense, filled with the kind of unease that precedes a storm. Greg was sitting at the head of the table, looking more confident than ever. I could feel the heat of his gaze as he glanced over at me, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. He didn't know yet, but I knew he could sense something was wrong. Peter started the meeting, his voice steady as he introduced the topic at hand. A thorough review of company finances. The board members listened, their faces unreadable as they shuffled through the documents in front of them. Then Peter slid the damning report across the table, the pages sliding neatly into place. "I think it's time we address some issues that have come to light," Peter said, his voice calm but unwavering. Greg's face paled as he reached for the report, his fingers visibly trembling as he flipped through the pages. I watched his expression shift from confusion to disbelief, and finally to fury. His eyes shot up to meet mine, a silent accusation in them. "You think you can just accuse me off?" Greg started, his voice rising, but Peter cut him off. "We have all the evidence right here, Greg," Peter said, his tone cool. "And we've also consulted with legal experts who've confirmed that what you've been doing is not only unethical, but illegal." The room went dead silent. The other board members exchanged looks, their faces filled with varying degrees of shock, disbelief, and anger. But it wasn't until I spoke that the weight of the moment truly hit. "I've worked here for years," I said, my voice shaking but determined. "I helped build this company. And to think that someone like you would use your position to take advantage of that, to betray everything this company stands for. It makes me sick. I didn't want to do this, but I had no choice. People deserve to know what you've been doing." Greg stood up, his chair scraping across the floor. He was visibly shaking now, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You think this is how it ends?" He spat, his voice venomous. "You think you can take me down? I've built this company. Without me, you'd be nothing." The arrogance, the sheer entitlement in his voice was maddening. But I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. "You didn't build this company, Greg. We built it. The people you used, the ones you exploited. We were the ones who made this company what it is. You're just the one who got greedy," I said, my voice unwavering. There was a long pause, and then one of the board members, a woman who had remained quiet up until that point, spoke up. "We've seen the evidence, Greg," she said, her voice sharp. "And this is unacceptable. We will not let this company go down because of one man's greed. You're fired, and we'll be reporting this to the authorities." Greg's face twisted in rage, but there was nothing he could do now. The truth had been laid bare. His empire, built on lies and manipulation, was crumbling before his eyes. The meeting ended quickly after that. Greg was escorted out of the building by security, his reputation in ruins. As for me, I stood there, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. The fight had been long, and it had taken everything I had. But I had done it. I had fought for what was right, and I had won. As the days passed, the company underwent a major restructuring. The board was overhauled, new leadership came in, and the corrupt practices Greg had instilled were rooted out. It wasn't easy. There were still many challenges to face, but I was finally able to breathe again. I had learned something through this process, something I hadn't realized until the very end. I had always thought that standing up for what was right meant fighting for myself. But in the end, it wasn't about me. It was about standing up for everyone who had been affected by Greg's actions, about making sure that justice was served, and that the company had a chance to rebuild. I didn't know where my career would go from here, but I knew one thing. I had changed. I was no longer the engineer who worked in the shadows, quietly fixing problems. I was someone who had found his voice, and I would never let it be silenced again. My name is Alex Carter, and I've spent the last decade building my business from the ground up. It wasn't easy. There were long nights, sacrifices, and moments when I questioned if it was all worth it. But now, at 32, I'm the proud majority shareholder of one of the fastest-growing tech startups in the country. I had always dreamed of being my own boss, of creating something that could leave a mark on the world. After years of working for others, I knew it was time to take the plunge. And when I did, I poured everything I had into making it succeed. From securing the initial funding to forming a team of brilliant minds, we were unstoppable. But somewhere along the way, things changed. It wasn't a drastic shift, more like a slow erosion. My company was thriving, but I couldn't ignore the tension between me and my executive team, especially Daniel, the COO. He was brilliant, ambitious, and fiercely competitive, but I always felt like he was trying to outshine me. There were disagreements, sometimes small, sometimes bigger, but we always managed to push through. That was until last week. I'd made a mistake, a small one, really. A technical glitch during a product launch that set us back a few days. It wasn't ideal, but it wasn't catastrophic either. I was ready to own up to it, accept the consequences, and move forward. But then, in a meeting that felt like it was happening in slow motion, Daniel dropped a bombshell. "Alex, I think it's time we talk about your position here," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "This company needs a leader who can make decisions without hesitation. Someone who can avoid mistakes like the one we've just witnessed. We need to think about the future." Before I could even respond, he made the announcement. I was being relieved of my duties as CEO. It was a gut punch, a betrayal I never saw coming. The words hung in the air like a bad dream. My first instinct was to fight back, to remind him that I owned the majority of the company's shares, that I could decide what direction we went in. But somehow those words didn't come out. Instead, I was stunned into silence. As I stood there, looking around the conference room at the faces of the other executives, a sense of betrayal washed over me. They weren't looking at me with sympathy. They were watching, waiting for my next move. And that's when it hit me. I had worked for this company, bled for it, and now, in the blink of an eye, I was being kicked to the curb by the very people I trusted. But this wasn't the end of my story. No, this was just the beginning. The moment the words left Daniel's mouth, everything around me blurred. It was like I was living in a nightmare, unable to wake up. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I owned the majority of the company. I had built it, nurtured it, made every decision from the ground up. How could they just fire me over a minor mistake? And not just fire me, force me out like I was some expendable cog in a machine I had created. The reality of what was happening didn't sink in immediately. I just sat there, stunned, trying to make sense of the situation. Alex, I think it's best for the company, Daniel continued, speaking with the kind of cold, clinical tone I had always thought reserved for corporate boardrooms, but never for people I trusted. You've been good to us, but we need someone who can keep this ship steady. We've got investors to answer to. We can't afford another mistake like this. It wasn't a mistake. It was a glitch. A minor hiccup that would have been resolved in a few days. But Daniel, always the opportunist, had seized on the situation, making it look like a major issue. His eyes glinted with something I couldn't place. Was it ambition? Was it revenge? Or just pure strategy to make sure he stayed at the top? I tried to speak, to assert my position, but my voice caught in my throat. This wasn't just a business decision. This was personal. My whole world felt like it was slipping away. Daniel, I'm the majority shareholder here. I have the final say. You can't do this, I said, my voice shaky but firm, trying to regain some semblance of control. Daniel didn't flinch. He merely nodded, as if he had already anticipated this response. That's the problem, Alex. You've been making decisions on your own for too long. And look where it's got us. We need someone who can make tough decisions without hesitation. You've built a great company, but I'm afraid you're not the right person to lead it anymore. The words were like knives in my chest. The audacity. The nerve. This wasn't just a challenge to my authority. It was a challenge to everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in. As I left the room, feeling the weight of their cold stares following me, I realized this wasn't just about the company. It wasn't even about the mistake itself. No, this was a deeper, more painful betrayal. Daniel had been my second in command, my confidant. We had shared countless hours working late into the night, building the company. And now, he was turning against me. But as angry as I was, something gnawed at the back of my mind. Was I truly as good a leader as I thought? Had I really been making the right decisions? I had always prided myself on being a hands-on CEO, deeply involved in every aspect of the business. But in the last year, I had felt disconnected, distant from the day-to-day operations, overwhelmed by the constant pressure of being at the helm. Perhaps, deep down, I knew something was wrong. Maybe I wasn't the leader I once was. I had always been the person who could fight through anything. When I was younger, I faced a string of failures and setbacks. But I kept pushing, refusing to let anything defeat me. I built this company on grit and determination, overcoming every challenge that came my way. But now I was fighting against the very people I had brought into my world, and that was a fight I hadn't prepared for. The more I thought about it, the more the weight of the situation settled in. If I left without a fight, if I walked away and let Daniel take control, I would be admitting failure. And if there was one thing I refused to do, it was to fail. Not after all the blood, sweat, and tears I had poured into this company. Not after all the sacrifices. But fighting back wasn't as simple as just walking into the boardroom and asserting my authority. Daniel had already maneuvered his pieces. He had rallied the board members behind him, and the investors were on his side. They had been nervous about my leadership for a while, and now they had the perfect excuse to push me out. The stakes had never been higher. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had no choice but to fight. I had to take back control, not just for the sake of the company, but for my own sense of self. Because if I didn't, what did that say about me? Was I really the person I thought I was? Could I stand by and let someone else erase everything I had built? No, I couldn't. But the path ahead wasn't clear. I couldn't just march into the office and demand my position back. Daniel wasn't a fool. He wouldn't back down easily. And the investors. They had seen what happened with the product launch. They were worried. They didn't want to take the risk of backing someone who might falter again. I needed a plan. But what could I do? I couldn't just make it all go away. I had to figure out a way to regain the board's trust, to prove that I was still the right person for the job. But I also needed to be strategic. I couldn't afford to make another mistake, to appear weak. If I did, it would be over. And what would that mean for the company? What would it mean for my future? I spent the next few days in a blur, meeting with lawyers, trying to understand my rights as the majority shareholder. Every conversation felt like a battle, each decision a step closer to either reclaiming my position or losing it all. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized something I had overlooked. Daniel wasn't just after my job. He was after the company itself. He had been positioning himself for months, planting seeds of doubt, making himself indispensable. And now, he was close to taking everything I had worked for. I was fighting not just for my position, but for my legacy. I couldn't let him win. But I also couldn't let this consume me. The emotional toll was immense. I had to balance my rage, my hurt, and my need for justice. But the deeper I got into this battle, the more I realized that this wasn't just about business anymore. It was personal. And in that moment, I knew I was ready to do whatever it took to take back what was mine. The days following my forced removal from the CEO position were a blur of frustration and strategic planning. Every time I walked into the office, it felt like the walls were closing in. Daniel had already taken over the reins, and the shift in the company's atmosphere was palpable. Where there had once been a sense of shared purpose, now there was only an undercurrent of tension. I could see it in the eyes of my former colleagues, those I had once considered friends. Some were avoiding me, some were giving me pitying looks, and others, more troublingly, were acting like I didn't exist. It was as if the very fabric of what had been a collaborative environment was unraveling. I had spent years building relationships with these people, relying on them to help steer the company towards success. But now, I felt like an outsider, watching as Daniel consolidated his power. The team meetings, once filled with open discussions, were now little more than monologues where Daniel laid down his vision. His version of the company's future, without room for anyone else's input. I could tell that my influence had already begun to wane, and that thought gnawed at me, turning my anger into something more dangerous. A burning determination to take back what was mine. The first obstacle I faced was the board. Most of them were already on Daniel's side, eager to move past the recent product glitch and stabilize the company. They had their concerns about my leadership, and Daniel had capitalized on that. But I was still a majority shareholder, and I knew that meant I had a seat at the table, if I could just figure out how to get back in. My lawyer, David, was the one who reminded me of that reality. "You've got a lot of power here, Alex," he said one evening as we pored over the company's bylaws. "Don't forget that. You're not powerless." But David's words, though reassuring, didn't ease the pit in my stomach. I had to be strategic, calculated. One wrong move and I'd be out for good. The company was everything to me, and if I didn't act carefully, I would lose not just my position but my legacy. I began by calling in favors from a few of my closest allies, people I had worked with for years, people who understood the vision behind the company. I needed their support in the upcoming board meetings. They were my inside voices, my last line of defense. But the more I talked to them, the more I realized how much Daniel had already manipulated the narrative. They were hesitant, unsure whether supporting me was worth the risk. Daniel had painted me as a liability, a figurehead who was too emotionally involved with the business to lead effectively. It was hard for them to see past that, to remember the person I'd used to be to them, the person who had helped them build their careers. And then came the investors. The board members were one thing, but the investors were another beast entirely. They controlled the financial future of the company. Daniel had made sure to get their backing early on, framing the whole situation as a matter of financial security. After all, if the company faltered due to a leadership misstep, the investors would lose their money. And they didn't care whose fault it was as long as they were protected. I reached out to one of the major investors, Michelle, who had been with me from the very beginning. She was more than just a financial backer. She was someone who had believed in me, someone who knew what I was capable of. But when we spoke, I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Alex, I'm not saying I don't believe in you. But you have to understand, the board has made its decision. Daniel's vision is what's best for the company. We need stability right now, not another round of internal conflict. Her words stung, but I knew it wasn't just about what she thought was best for the company. It was about what was safest for her investment. The more I tried to convince her that I could fix things, the more it became clear. I wasn't going to win this with logic alone. I needed something more. That's when I began to dig deeper, looking for leverage. I had to find something, anything, that could turn the tide in my favor. I spent sleepless nights going through financial reports, digging through old emails and meeting notes, trying to find a weakness in Daniel's plans. And then, one night, I found it. A series of transactions, legitimate, but highly questionable in their timing. Daniel had made some deals with external contractors that weren't reported properly, and the more I dug into them, the more I realized that some of these deals could be seen as a conflict of interest. I didn't know if it would be enough to destroy his credibility, but it was something. Something to give me leverage. The next morning, I called David. I need you to get the ball rolling on a formal investigation, I said, my voice steady, though my heart raced. If Daniel's hiding something, it's time we exposed it. David didn't hesitate. I'll get on it right away, but be careful, Alex. If we play this wrong, it could backfire. I knew the risks, but the stakes had never been higher. Meanwhile, I continued to put pressure on the board. I used every tool at my disposal, emails, phone calls, and even private meetings to remind them of who I was and what I had built. I needed them to understand that the company wasn't just a business to me, it was my life's work. I wasn't going to let Daniel steal it from me without a fight. But every conversation I had with them seemed to end the same way. It's too late, Alex, they would say. The decision's been made. Still, I pressed on, refusing to back down. And just when I thought I couldn't take much more, the breaking point came. I had a meeting with Daniel, the first since my ousting. He called me in under the guise of discussing the future of the company, but I knew what it was. This was his final move, his chance to show me once and for all that I no longer had a place in this world I had created. When I walked into his office, he was already seated, a smug smile playing on his lips. Alex, I've been expecting you, he said, leaning back in his chair. You know, I was really hoping we could part ways amicably, but I'm starting to think you don't know when to quit. I couldn't help but clench my fists. This was the man who had once been my partner, my confidant. And now, he was reveling in my downfall. You've made your choice, Daniel, I said, my voice low. But you're not getting away with this. Not without a fight. He raised an eyebrow, as if he were amused by my defiance. You think you can win this? You're fighting a losing battle. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. We both knew the war wasn't over yet. The day of the board meeting was approaching. The tension had been building for weeks, and I knew this was the moment where everything would either fall apart or come together. The stakes had never been higher. If I didn't act decisively, if I didn't find a way to regain control of the company, I'd be left with nothing. No position, no legacy, just a ghost of the empire I had built. The weeks leading up to that meeting had been a whirlwind. I had gathered every bit of evidence I could, documents, emails, even some audio recordings of Daniel making offhand remarks about his plans to consolidate power. It wasn't enough to definitively expose him, but it was enough to make the board question his motives. Still, the longer this dragged on, the more I felt like I was slipping into a battle I was bound to lose. The worst part wasn't even the fear of losing the company. It was the emotional toll of seeing what my relationship with Daniel had become. I had trusted him. I had taken him under my wing, sharing my vision and including him in every major decision. And now, here he was, using everything he had learned to turn the tables on me. The betrayal was worse than any business deal I had ever faced. It felt like a personal attack, a violation of everything we had built together. But I couldn't afford to wallow in self-pity. This was it, the moment of truth. If I didn't fight back with everything I had, I would lose everything. And so, I prepared. I spent sleepless nights running through scenarios, rehearsing arguments, and making sure I knew exactly what I was up against. When the board meeting finally arrived, I walked into that conference room with my head held high, my nerves masked by a veneer of confidence. The room was silent as I took my seat at the table. Daniel was already there, his usual smirk replaced by a more serious expression, as if he knew this was the endgame. The other board members were present, but their eyes didn't meet mine. They were all focused on Daniel, and it was clear they had already made up their minds. "Alex," Daniel said, his tone polite but cold, "I'm glad you could join us today. I know this is difficult, but it's time we discuss the future of the company." I clenched my jaw. I wasn't about to let him dictate the narrative. "I'm not here to discuss the future of the company," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I'm here to take back what's mine." The board members exchanged uneasy glances, and I could see the doubt starting to creep in. They hadn't expected me to come out swinging like this. Daniel's expression tightened, and for a brief moment, I saw the slightest flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough to fuel my resolve. "I've spent weeks gathering information," I continued, leaning forward. "I have evidence that shows you've been making deals behind closed doors, deals that benefit you personally, not the company. You've been using your position to advance your own interests at the expense of the business, and I have no intention of letting that go unchecked." Daniel's face hardened, but he didn't interrupt. He was waiting for me to dig my own grave. "You don't have any evidence, Alex," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're just bitter because you can't let go. This company needs a strong leader, not someone who is emotionally compromised." I didn't back down. "I don't need to be a strong leader in the way you think I do. I need to be a leader who is committed to the people in this company, who is willing to fight for what's right. I'm not giving up my position without a fight, Daniel. Not when I have something to fight for." I slid a folder across the table, letting it land in front of him with a soft thud. The folder contained the evidence I had gathered, emails, records of unauthorized transactions, even notes from meetings where Daniel had spoken about his plans to push me out and take control of the company. I watched as Daniel's fingers trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages, his expression faltering for the first time. "I have every intention of ensuring the company thrives, Daniel," I said, my voice low but firm. "But it won't thrive under your leadership, not when you're more focused on your own ambitions than on the people who helped build this business. The truth is, you're not the right person for this company. You never were." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of the room's attention on me, the board members' eyes shifting between Daniel and me, waiting to see who would come out on top. Daniel's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening with rage. "You think you can just accuse me of these things without consequences?" He spat. "You're playing a dangerous game, Alex. You're threatening everything we've worked for. You'll ruin us both if you keep this up." I didn't flinch. I'm not threatening anything. I'm exposing the truth. You wanted to play this game, Daniel. You wanted to push me out and take over. But now, the truth is coming out. And the board, your so-called supporters, will have to choose. Will they stand with the truth, or will they stand with a man who's only looking out for himself? I could see the cracks forming in Daniel's confidence. His hands were shaking now, his face flushed with anger. He was losing control of the narrative, and he knew it. I had caught him off guard. But even as I spoke, I knew this wasn't over. There was one more card I had to play, one final move to seal my victory. I'd also have a message from one of our major investors, Michelle, I said, pulling out a printed email. She's concerned about the direction the company is taking under your leadership. She's pulling her support unless the board reconsiders its position. That means your financial backing is no longer guaranteed, Daniel. His eyes widened for a split second before he masked it with a sneer. But it was too late. The board was already turning toward me, their eyes now filled with doubt about his leadership. The tension in the room was unbearable, and I knew that this moment would be the turning point. Would they side with him, the man who had manipulated them into believing he was the future? Or would they stand with me, the person who had built this company from nothing and had a genuine stake in its success? I didn't know how it would end, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going down without a fight. The board meeting stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The silence that had settled after I presented my evidence seemed to hang in the air, suffocating everyone in the room. Daniel had lost his usual bravado, but he wasn't going down without a fight. He started to make counterarguments, trying to dismiss the allegations as misunderstandings or coincidences. But it was too late. The seeds of doubt had already been planted, and they were beginning to sprout in the minds of the board members. The pivotal moment came when Greg, one of the senior board members and a longtime ally of Daniel, spoke up. He had always been a quiet presence in these meetings, but now his voice carried a weight that cut through the tension. Alex is right, Greg said, his eyes meeting mine. We've been so focused on putting out fires that we've lost sight of what this company stands for. We're not just here to make money. We're here to create something lasting, something that reflects our values. And that means doing what's right, even when it's hard. I could see the shift in the room. A few board members nodded, some of them looking at each other as if they were finally seeing the bigger picture. Daniel's face twisted with rage, but he knew he had lost the support he once had. He looked around the room, but the board members were no longer looking at him with the same admiration. The cracks in his empire were too deep to ignore now. I've been doing what's best for this company, Daniel snapped, his voice hoarse with frustration. Everything I've done has been to ensure our survival. I never meant for things to get out of hand. I thought I was doing the right thing. It's not enough to say you were trying to do the right thing, Daniel, I said, cutting him off. Actions speak louder than words. And right now, your actions have shown that you're more interested in your own power than in the well-being of this company and its people. There was a long pause as the room absorbed my words. The board members were no longer just passive observers, they were active participants in deciding the future of the company. And in that moment, I saw them for who they really were, people who wanted to make the right choice, who were tired of being manipulated and missiled. Finally, it was Rachel, one of the newest board members, who broke the silence. She cleared her throat and looked at Daniel. Daniel, after everything that's come to light today, I think we need to consider the bigger picture, she said. We've seen what Alex has done for this company. We've seen the integrity and dedication he's shown over the years. And I can't ignore what's been revealed about your leadership. I'm sorry, but I can't support you any longer. Rachel's words were like the final nail in the coffin. One by one, the other board members spoke up, voicing their concerns about Daniel's leadership and expressing their support for me. The weight of their words hit Daniel like a ton of bricks. His face turned pale, and he fell silent, unable to come up with a rebuttal. It was over. I hereby declare that Daniel will be removed as CEO, Greg said, his voice firm. "Alex, as the majority shareholder, you'll resume control of the company, effective immediately." The room erupted into a mix of applause and murmurs. I sat there, stunned by the suddenness of it all. The fight had been so long, so exhausting, that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to win. But now, as I looked around the room at the faces of the board members, some relieved, some wary, but all supportive, I realized that this victory wasn't just about regaining my position. It was about something much more profound. The truth had won. Integrity had won. And the company, despite everything, had survived. After the meeting, I made my way back to my office, a sense of accomplishment filling me. But as I sat down at my desk, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I had won, yes, but at what cost? The relationship with Daniel had been irreparably damaged. The trust that had once existed between us was gone. I had fought for the company, but in doing so, I had lost a friend. Or at least someone I had once considered a friend. But as I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that this was part of the growth I had to undergo. The company, the people, even the relationships, they were all important, but they couldn't define who I was. I was more than just a CEO, more than just a leader of a company. I was someone who had fought for what was right, who had stuck to my values even when everything seemed stacked against me. I had learned the hard way that loyalty, while essential, could also be dangerous when it blinded me to the truth. I had trusted Daniel too much, given him too much leeway, and in doing so, I had ignored the signs that something was wrong. But now I could see things more clearly. I understood that leadership wasn't just about making the right business decisions. It was about making the right ethical decisions, no matter how difficult they might be. And as I sat in my office, looking out at the city below, I knew that I had learned something invaluable. Power could be taken, but integrity had to be earned. The company was back in my hands, but the journey I had taken to get here had changed me in ways I never expected. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first started this journey. I had become someone stronger, more resilient, and more aware of what truly mattered. The conflict had been resolved, but my transformation had only just begun. James, the CEO, would like to speak with you. He is accompanied by Michael. It looks like you're getting fired at last. I thought to myself as I made my way to the CEO's office. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy. Gloom swept over me through the elevator in the corridor. As my subordinate had mentioned, Mr. Smith and Michael, the head of the department, were present when I walked into the CEO's office. "You're not a good fit in our organization." Mr. Smith said, "You're fired." Michael, who was seated next to me, lifted the corners of his mouth in a joyful smile upon hearing this abrupt dismissal. Then, however, Mr. Smith went on, "Maybe you're not understanding the actual reason behind this dismissal." His next revelation was startlingly surprising. "My name is James. I was just a regular employee of the company when I turned 37 this year. I'm originally from a remote section of Idaho, but I currently reside in a part of New York. Though it seems strange to say about myself, I've never been able to become as cool and detached as city people. Perhaps this is because I was raised in a generous and laid-back rural setting. I'm a man of great compassion, and I always end up supporting people who are struggling or in a vulnerable situation. I had attended a mid-tier private university in New York after finishing high school in rural Idaho. I worked a variety of part-time jobs while I was in college before landing a position at TTE, an aid company that was hardly more than a startup at the time. 15 years had gone by as I worked at this company and battled. The company, which was little when I joined, has evolved into a mid-sized ag trade company, and I've reached this age. My work environment is, to put it mildly, far from ideal as the head of the system development unit at our New York headquarters and a mid-level manager. As a head in name only, I'm always torn between my superiors and my subordinates' demands. a quintessential case of being in a difficult situation. Many of my subordinates come from elite universities, which makes them challenging to manage in general. Some are quite forceful and have very high confidence and self-esteem. Even though they don't say it aloud, I frequently sense their disobedience and mockery of my directions as a lousy supervisor with a far lesser educational level than theirs. They regard me as their head, to put it another way. Furthermore, Michael, the chief of the System Development Division and my immediate supervisor, is a classic opportunist who rose through the ranks of his company simply by being astute. A dishonest superior who simply wants to benefit without working hard. He has a tendency to assign all significant or difficult jobs to his subordinates, leaving everything to others while claiming all the credit for himself. The majority of these problematic supervisors and subordinates come from the exclusive private K university, creating an intolerable university clique. James, your alma mater university is like the typical backup university for us K university graduates, isn't it? Michael frequently asks me. It's depressing. You must have a complex like that. He says this out loud, ensuring I hear it. The subordinates from K University laugh mockingly at me, even though it isn't funny at all. Indeed, my university is not highly ranked and is considered a safety school for students aiming for prestigious universities like K University. I too had applied to prestigious universities but ended up at my safety option. So Michael's sarcastic comments often struck a chord with me. In this hostile office environment, my oasis was Elizabeth, who recently started working as a cleaner in our office. Elizabeth, not yet accustomed to her job, often made mistakes and seemed lost on the floor, which led to some mean-spirited younger employees clicking their tongues or harassing her openly. However, as I mentioned earlier, being raised in the countryside has instilled in me a nature that can't ignore those invulnerable positions. Gradually, I found myself discreetly helping Elizabeth when she struggled with her cleaning tasks. I started to strike up friendly conversations with her. Elizabeth wore a large cleaner's hat, pulled down over her eyes, and a big mask, making it hard to see her face. She seemed to be quite elderly. She warmed up to me as I helped her out and started making small talk, sharing stories from her life that were both interesting and insightful. Indeed, Elizabeth's stories, full of wisdom from a life well lived, became a source of comfort for me. In the midst of the hostile work environment that left me feeling on edge, my casual chats with Elizabeth gradually became an irreplaceable form of relaxation. However, my subordinates, especially those in the K University clique led by Michael, openly mocked us. Seeing me with my lower education happily chatting with the cleaner Elizabeth, they would loudly say, "Low-educated old man and an old lady, a perfect match at the bottom." One day, after working late at the office and feeling completely drained, I finally made it to the nearest station. As I passed through the ticket gate and descended the stairs to the platform, a wallet flew out of the bag of an elderly woman walking slightly ahead of me and fell to the ground. However, the elderly lady didn't notice and continued hurrying toward the platform. I immediately made my way through the crowd, picked up the fallen wallet, looked up, and frantically searched for her. To my relief, I found her already lined up at the boarding area of the platform. It was a platform for a train heading in the opposite direction to mine. I needed to get this wallet back to that elderly lady quickly. In the midst of the rush hour crowd, I hurried down the stairs to the platform as fast as I could. But unfortunately, the train was already pulling in. The train doors opened all at once, and the elderly lady boarded. I had no choice. It was going the opposite way, but I would have to get on that train. Desperate, I raced down the stairs and barely managed to slip through the doors just as they were closing, boarding the train heading in the opposite direction to my home. Once on, I found the train packed to the brim with commuters. I had seen the elderly lady with the lost wallet board the next car over. I had to get this wallet to her before she got off. While receiving some annoyed looks and tuts from other passengers, I apologized profusely and slowly made my way through the crowded car towards the next one. By the time I reached the elderly lady's car, 2 stations had passed. I quickly explained how I found her wallet and came to return it. The elderly lady looked incredibly surprised. Though she appeared quite elderly, she seemed energetic and had a kind, refined face. What struck me was how her eyes widened in shock the moment she saw me. "You are such a kind person to go out of your way to return a lost wallet by boarding a train going in the opposite direction of your home," she said. The elderly lady was so moved, thanking me repeatedly, that I became embarrassed and modestly replied, "Oh, it was nothing. Just doing what anyone would." Just then, as the train was stopping at the second station, I said, "Well, this is my stop," and bid the elderly lady goodbye before hopping off the train. Having taken the train in the wrong direction, I decided to wait on the opposite platform for a train going back the way I came. That's when something strange occurred to me. How did that elderly lady know I took the train in the opposite direction, despite not having mentioned anything about myself? The elderly lady somehow knew I had taken the train in the opposite direction to return her wallet. Life is full of mysteries. With a puzzled shake of my head, I boarded the train home. The next day, as I arrived at work as usual, my colleague Brian rushed over to my desk. "James, thank you so much. The proposal you advised me on last week. I presented it as you instructed, and we got the contract. This morning, Mr. Smith personally called me to commend me for it. It's all thanks to you." Honestly, I had always thought Brian was one of those who looked down on me with a bad attitude, so his sudden change took me by surprise. I had advised Brian on numerous occasions, and this wasn't the first time a deal had gone through. But it was the first time he had expressed gratitude and thanked me like this. Was being praised by Mr. Smith personally really such a game changer? Sensing my skepticism, Brian added, "Yeah, James, the reason I came to thank you is that he told me to." He said, "This successful deal is thanks to James, a competent and exemplary supervisor. Make sure you thank him properly." Watching Brian walk away, I muttered to myself, why would he? That day was just the beginning. From the next day on, the atmosphere around me at work began to change significantly. Without altering my work style or approach from the previous week, good news and results started coming my way, one after another. Specifically, one of our long-standing clients approached us with a proposal to embark on a major project together. To my surprise, they nominated me as the person in charge from our company. Having worked here for about 15 years, this was the first time I had been specifically requested for a project. In the past, even if I did high-quality work, someone else always seemed to take the credit or obstruct my efforts. It felt like I had gone from being a symbol of misfortune to someone basking in the limelight. I asked Jessica, the client's representative, why she chose me as a point person for our company despite there being other employees available. Jessica replied, "It was because Mr. Smith recommended you. He assured us that if it's James from the System Development Department, there can be no mistake. We took the liberty of looking into your past achievements, and true to his word, found you to be an exceptionally capable individual." I was taken aback to hear, once again, that he had played a role in this. And so, my once luckless corporate life seemed to be taking a turn for the better recently, lifting my spirits and making me grin to myself. Being appointed as the person in charge of an unprecedentedly large project from a client filled me with enthusiasm, and I dived into the preparations. This project was undoubtedly the biggest opportunity in my career, and its success would significantly enhance my reputation. I was brimming with motivation. Day after day, I stayed late at the office, fully focused on preparing for this project, creating specifications for the newly developed program, drafting various explanatory documents, and preparing for presentations. I was giving it my all, drawing on every bit of strength I had. After a month of such dizzyingly busy yet fulfilling days, the final presentation, where I would meet all the clients, was just 2 days away. After tirelessly working through sleepless nights, I managed to complete the new system and nearly finished the specification documents and the extensive materials for business negotiations by yesterday. On the day before the presentation, I arrived at work trying to contain my excitement and launched the newly completed system for a trial run. Then, I tried to open the specification document files stored on my PC along with other files for the business negotiation presentation, but they were gone. All the files had been deleted. Moreover, all the backup files I had made as a precaution were also erased. Even worse, all the documents I had printed out and piled up next to my PC just the day before had vanished without a trace. This can't be happening. What on earth is going on? I felt a chill run down my spine and couldn't help but shout out loud. In a panic, I searched under my desk and in my drawers, desperately looking for the stacks of documents, but they were nowhere to be found. As I was doing this, drawn by my earlier shout, some people came over laughing uproariously. When I turned towards the source of the crude laughter, there were Michael and his entourage looking down on me with scorn. Too bad all those documents you worked so hard on, and the files on your PC. This guy threw them all away. Michael, seemingly finding the situation hilarious, burst into laughter, pointing at David, a junior employee. David was a newcomer, but like Michael, he was from Key University and had a nasty personality, acting like Michael's lackey. I thought your files and documents were garbage, just like you, so I deleted all the files along with the backups and threw all the paper stacks into the shredder bin, David said with a flippant remark. As David spoke, Michael and the rest of the group burst into uncontrollable laughter. Haha, it's hilarious, right? Threw them all away. Now James can do his presentation. Bye-bye business deal. Oh dear, such a big project gone to waste. What a pity. Poor thing. Michael and his cronies mocked and tormented me, making a laughingstock out of me. Glaring at Michael and David, I said, "Do you have any idea what you're doing? Aren't you ashamed of yourselves for stooping to such despicable actions?" To this, David brazenly replied, "Not at all. We have to nip in the bud any bad influence from our incompetent senior, or it's us, the juniors, who end up getting crushed." Michael chimed in, "Ha, getting told off by the newbie, huh? James, you've been getting a bit too cocky lately because you've been recognized a bit. You were an eyesore, so we just gave you a reality check. Go ahead and embarrass yourself in the business meeting and revert back to your mediocre self. And don't you dare get ahead of yourself ever again." Michael, seizing the moment, sneered. Hearing his appalling words, I realized everything. Michael, the department head of system development, was deeply resentful that I, a mere supervisor, had been appointed by the client for a big project, bypassing him. His actions were clearly driven by ugly jealousy toward me. Stunned by their actions and responses, I was left speechless. Michael, with a parting shot of "let this be a lesson. Never overstep again," you worthless supervisor, walked away with his entourage from my desk. As I watched their retreating figures with a sense of despair, I muttered to myself, all the backup files were deleted and all the documents were thrown away. I could start over from scratch, but there's absolutely no way I can finish before the day after tomorrow's business meeting. It's all over. How could I have been so careless? I blamed myself for leaving my PC unlocked and for carelessly leaving the documents by my desk, feeling a sense of futility in hindsight. The next day, I went to work feeling utterly despondent. With the business meeting now seemingly doomed, my spirit had hit rock bottom, and I was overwhelmed with depression, barely able to stand. Unable to focus on work, I went to the break room alone, repeatedly sighing and holding my head in my hands. Embarrassingly, I felt a lump in my throat from my own inadequacy. Then, someone patted my shoulder. Looking up, I saw Elizabeth, the cleaner, looking at me with concern. "Elizabeth, sorry, I'm not really in the mood for small talk right now," I said. Elizabeth smiled kindly with just her eyes showing. Then, she presented something she had been hiding behind her back. To my astonishment, it was the stack of documents I had printed out, which were supposed to have been thrown away by David. The specification documents for the new system, the materials for the presentation, and all the documents for the business negotiations were all there, intact. Elizabeth, where did you find these? I asked, surprised. Elizabeth replied, the day before yesterday, when I was collecting trash, I found a large stack of documents in the bin for shredding, which isn't usually there. It seemed odd, so I checked and saw they were the documents you've been working so hard on every day. I thought to myself that I couldn't let such important things be shredded, so I collected and saved them. Right there at that moment, Elizabeth appeared to me like a saint. Elizabeth, thank you so much. With these, I can go ahead with tomorrow's presentation and negotiation. You saved me at the last minute. You're my savior, Elizabeth. Thank you. Overwhelmed with gratitude, I couldn't help but rejoice. Elizabeth watched me with a pleased expression, nodding repeatedly as she spoke. What goes around comes around. You're my savior after all. Faced with Elizabeth's cryptic remark, I looked at her in bewilderment, only to see her chuckle amusingly in response. The following day, I was able to attend a presentation for the big project we were working on with our client. Thanks to the documents, I managed to conduct a successful presentation. The subsequent negotiations also ended in great success, leading to contracts with several major client companies. It turned out to be one of the largest deals in the history of my company. Elizabeth, thank you. The negotiations were a huge success thanks to you, I thought. I wanted to share this great success with Elizabeth, who had saved the documents before anyone else. When I happily arrived at work the next day, I was greeted by David, one of Michael's spiteful followers. David said to me with a sneer, James, Mr. Smith wants to talk to you, and Michael is joining him. It seems, James, you are finally being let go. Still buzzing from the success of yesterday's negotiations, David's words felt like a cold shower. Just when I thought I was finally in a position to shine, my joy was short-lived. Now I was being fired. David mentioned that Michael was also in the CEO's office. Probably, Michael had framed the deletion of my files as a result of my mishandling. That must have led to discussions of my dismissal due to a supposed lack of confidentiality management skills. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy, I thought. With a heavy heart, I made my way to the CEO's office, pondering over these thoughts in the elevator and the hallway. I knocked and entered the CEO's office. Upon entering, just as David had said, Mr. Smith and Michael were there. James, you've come. Take a seat. Mr. Smith gestured for me to sit. Then, unexpectedly, he said, You're not suited for our company. You're fired. I thought to myself in shock, this is so sudden, and screamed internally, hearing Mr. Smith's abrupt announcement. Michael, sitting next to me, grinned with joy. Although I was prepared for the worst, the injustice of it all filled me with an unbearable sense of frustration. I couldn't help but question Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, I'm fully aware that I hadn't performed perfectly. I apologize. However, I have always worked diligently for this company. Isn't a sudden dismissal too harsh? Could you at least explain the reason? Cutting off my plea, Mr. Smith said, Hold on, James. It seems you're misunderstanding something. I wasn't talking about firing you. What? I exclaimed in surprise at Mr. Smith's unexpected response. James, you're a treasure to our company. Firing you would be a loss for us. I was talking about firing Michael. You, Michael. At Mr. Smith's words, Michael was taken aback. What are you saying, Mr. Smith? Why would you fire me, the manager, instead of this incompetent supervisor, James? Even at this point, Michael didn't hold back his disdain for me. It's quite the opposite. And Michael, why do you think it's only fair for you to be fired? You should know best, don't you? Come in now. Mr. Smith shouted toward the secretary's office. Then, the door to the secretary's office opened, and in came Elizabeth. Seeing her, Michael was the first to react angrily. "The cleaning lady? Hey, we're having an important conversation here. Don't just barge in." Despite being yelled at by Michael, Elizabeth retorted, "Old lady? Who do you think you're talking to?" With that, Elizabeth removed her mask and hat, which she never took off in public. Upon seeing her face, I couldn't help but exclaim. It was definitely a face I recognized. "It's you. The lady who dropped her wallet on the train that time," I said tentatively. Elizabeth smiled warmly and replied, "Yes, thank you so much for that time. Thanks to you, I didn't lose my important cash cards and driver's license. You're my savior." To think that the elegant elderly lady I encountered that time was the cleaning staff I chatted with every day. Seeing my speechless surprise, Mr. Smith added with a smile, "Indeed, James. I also want to thank you for returning my mother's wallet. Though belated, I'd appreciate it." It seemed Michael was the most shocked by Mr. Smith's words. "My mother? Wait, is this lady really your mother?" As Michael's face turned pale with shock, Mr. Smith reprimanded him sharply. "Watch your mouth, Michael. You've been slandering someone's mother by calling her an old lady. It's because of your twisted personality that you're utterly unfit for our company." Michael, scolded by Mr. Smith, began to tremble with fear, his face turning even paler. After giving Michael a disdainful glance, Elizabeth began to explain the situation. The details were as follows. The mother, wanting to contribute to Heron's company in some way, decided to utilize her cleaning skills and began working as a cleaner. While working as a cleaner, she observed the office staff and their characters. During this time, Elizabeth was drawn to my work ethic and character. After the incident with the wallet, she had even suggested to her son that my promotion and performance evaluation be reconsidered. Moreover, Elizabeth had been keeping an eye on Michael's tyrannical behavior and had reported everything, including the truth about the negotiation documents, to Mr. Smith. That was the essence of it. During Elizabeth's explanation, Michael's trembling grew worse, and he eventually collapsed at his knees on the floor, completely overwhelmed. This was truly a sight of utter defeat. Looking down at the pitiful side of Michael, Mr. Smith said calmly, "Michael, you are truly despicable. Today you're being dismissed for disciplinary reasons, but before that, apologize to James for all the trouble you've caused him, if you have any shred of conscience left as a human being." Michael, crouching on the floor and holding his head weakly, looked up and said, "James, I'm sorry for all the mean things I've done." Watching Michael break down and sob, I felt a profound sense of pity. In the end, Michael's wrongdoings were brought to light, and the board of directors unanimously decided to dismiss him for disciplinary reasons. Michael left TTE, but his followers remained in the company. Ironically, the very next day, those who were part of Michael's faction came to me, one after the other, apologizing for their past rudeness and insults. Following these events, I was promoted to the head of the System Development Department in the next personnel change. Thus, peace returned to the department. The lesson from this entire experience was that those who extend a helping hand to others in need will find others willing to help them in their own times of need. Elizabeth repaid the favor of me returning her wallet with the significant act of saving crucial documents for a business deal. It was a true realization of the saying, "Kindness begets kindness." Half a year has passed since then. As the new department head, I continue to have a good relationship with Elizabeth, Mr. Smith's mother, who still works as a cleaner from time to time, and I often enjoy chatting together as a break from work. Now, trusted by subordinates and favored by Mr. Smith, I lead a smooth and successful life, a stark contrast to the unfortunate first half of my life. Oh my, it's been a while, but I recognized you right away because you still look as frail and scruffy as ever. Are you wandering around here because you're sick? At the hospital, I ran into a classmate who, for some reason, always disliked me in high school. You've always been weak-minded and incompetent, but to be physically weak as well is just the worst. How pitiful. Well, I'm actually your attending physician. Excuse me, my name is James. I work as a resident doctor at the hospital. Doctors are considered to be among the successful in this world, but as far as I'm concerned, that's not the case at all. The term successful probably applies to every doctor but me. Hi, Dr. Smith. How many children do you have? I'm still single, I replied. Mistaken for a married man by a patient, the hospital room was enveloped in an awkward atmosphere. Nurses overhearing my conversation with the patient struggled to suppress their laughter. Dr. Smith, you somehow look older. Is it because you're worn out? Isn't that a bit harsh to say to my face? Often mistaken for being older than my actual age due to my appearance, I frequently receive harsh comments from the nurses. Even though I became a doctor, my life is still far from luxurious. Due to my medical school loans, I'm in debt, so the prospect of enjoying a meal out with a woman was out of the question. The position of girlfriend has been vacant for a long time. I must admit I have a dull personality and simple thought processes. Fortunately, or not, I rarely dwell on my misfortunes or unhappiness, managing to sleep off most concerns without it affecting my health. Even when I do notice, I think, I've lived this far without worrying. Why start now? And just let it go. My family and friends often look at me with a mix of pity, calling me knave. However, I couldn't care less about other people's opinions. Even I, however, can't help but feel down when faced with the sharp words from the nurses who have both beauty and talent. They would say, Dr. Smith, maybe you should take a shower, or it would be nice if a wife to take care of you would show up soon, offering nothing but harsh opinions. Even today, after a night shift, a colleague said to me, you should shave your beard at least. It might make that face of yours look a bit better. Even with this face, is that necessary? I muttered to myself. But I followed everyone's advice as usual and continued down the path of an unattractive loser. One day, a nurse scolded me upon seeing my appearance. Dr. Smith, it sets a bad example for the other staff if you don't take care of your grooming. It makes the patients uncomfortable. Looking in the mirror, I saw my hair was a mess from sleeping in. Rushing and without time to style my hair or shave, my appearance was far from commendable. Indifferent even to my own appearance, I spent my days being reprimanded by those around me. Dr. Smith, please don't sleep here. Yes, yes, I replied. Nearly dozing off with a cup in hand, I was jolted awake by the sharp voice of the head nurse, Emily. Though the coffee in the cup swayed, it fortunately didn't spill on my lab coat. Had I stained my coat, Emily would have scolded me again. Today, I was unexpectedly asked to step in for a surgery, which ended up taking a long time. As a result, I had to stay overnight at the hospital. By the time I finished the paperwork I had planned to do, I was starting to feel extremely sleepy. I thought about the father-like man said that, continuing to repeat similar sentiments. Peeking through the open door, I saw 3 people standing around Susan, who was sitting up in bed. Susan was biting her lip in frustration, her face downcast. Judging from the conversation, the 3 seemed to be her parents and sister. The way the words flowed out as they berated her suggested this was a usual treatment for Susan. To me, Susan seemed perfect, but it pained me to see that her home situation was not even close to that. As oblivious as I am, I could still understand the situation in the room. Personal feelings aside, this is a hospital, and I am her attending doctor. I knocked vigorously on the door, not waiting for a response before opening it and stepping into the room. All 4 pairs of eyes pierced through me, but I'm not one to flinch at mere stares. Hi, I'm Dr. Smith, the attending physician. Nice to meet the family, and please leave soon. Visits that burden the patient are not allowed. While the parents were taken aback, the sister quickly recovered from my surprise attack and started speaking boldly. What are you talking about? Are you saying it's not a problem for you to intrude on our family gathering? Family gathering. Blaming the sick for their illness, calling them disgraceful, saying they've always been the lesser one, and getting up on a patient like this. That's a novel idea for a family gathering. My words seemed to unsettle them, with the parents exchanging glances. Yet Kate, Susan's sister, continued to argue. We're family, and that's why we can say these things. It's for her own good. Kate, with a sticky sweet smile, was about to say more when Susan cut her off with a cry. Stop it. What's for my good? You don't care about me at all. Susan must have been holding back a lot until now. Her patience seemed to have run out as she vented her frustrations on her family. No matter how hard I try, I've never been praised. This is wrong. Something's missing. Kate did this. Kate was like that. Kate would have. I'm sick of it. Susan's voice was almost a scream by the end, causing her sister to retract her creepy smile. Kate snorted. It can't be helped. The truth is you're inferior to me. Telling you the truth and making you understand your place is what families do. You really are a hopeless case. Kate sighed with twisted logic, and I felt a chill down my spine. But Susan, who must have been aware of her sister's abnormality, completely ignored her and glared at her parents. When Kate wanted a pet, you immediately got a dog for her. But when I brought home a stray kitten, you told me you'd given it away while I was at school. Right, Mom? But then a year later, my family-loving sister told me the truth. It wasn't given away. You had taken it to the shelter to be put down, and you didn't tell me right away because you knew I'd go looking for it. Susan's voice trembled slightly with tears, but after taking a deep breath, she continued calmly. You're right, Kate. I was a fool. I'm done seeking love from people like you. From now on, you don't have to think of me as family, and I won't think of you that way either. So please leave. Don't ever come back. Susan firmly declared her disownment. With that, her sister snorted. Then from now on, even if you're in trouble, don't rely on us. I doubt anyone would want to help you fight your illness on your own. Kate spat out those words and left the hospital room with her parents. The room became silent once they were gone, returning to its usual sterile atmosphere. Days later, in the courtyard on a mild spring day, I approached Susan, who was sitting on a bench looking up at the sky. Hey there. She glanced at me briefly, keeping her face turned upwards. Since the day she broke ties with her family, her prickly attitude towards me had softened somewhat, but it hadn't disappeared entirely. I still got a sharp comment whenever we met. Are you sure it's okay to have such an unreliable doctor? That's a harsh way to put it. I'm worried I might catch some strange germs from this unhygienic doctor. Despite the harsh words, the nurses had been reassuring, saying that I'm competent, so there hadn't been any formal complaints yet. But my mentality is certainly wearing thin. Ignoring Susan's reaction, I sat down beside her. Are you feeling nervous? I tried to speak as gently as possible. Susan's surgery was scheduled in 2 days. Even if it went well, she would need lifelong medication and occasional convalescence. I was much more nervous during my final job interview, believe it or not. I had an offer from an international company. That's amazing. I was genuinely impressed, but Susan smiled self-deprecatingly. Well, I had to decline it because of my illness. My family was disappointed, and they lashed out at me. It was a mess. Far from receiving sympathy from her family, she was actually in such a situation that they probably blamed her more for declining the job offer rather than worrying about her illness. That's unfortunate. But with your talents, once things settle down, there'll be plenty of companies wanting you. When I tried to cheer her up, Susan fell silent for a moment before speaking. You've been a bit of help, you know. It was the first time she had mentioned what happened in the hospital room. Why did you help me? You thought I was a terrible person, didn't you? I'm your attending physician after all. It's my job to put noisy visitors in their place. I put on a show of bravado. Honestly, I'm not usually that assertive. Back then, I really didn't want to intervene, and there was a chance I would have been tucked down if Susan hadn't declared her estrangement. It might have led to an ever-ending argument. I've hated you since high school. Really? It hurt to be told that directly, but I tried to remain calm. You weren't particularly good-looking or smart, always walking around confidently with your messy hair and wrinkled shirt. You were careless and insensitive, often upsetting teachers and girls. She spoke in a flat voice, recounting my embarrassing past. I try to live without dwelling on the past, but remembering it now is cringeworthy. My self-esteem was definitely taking a hit. But you always had people around you, and you got along well with your brother, who was a year ahead. No one really spoke badly of you to your face. Indeed, no one directly confronted me about my character. I had been scolded many times, but I also received plenty of praise. I must have had a fairly normal upbringing. I was trying so hard in that family, yet nobody loved me. I couldn't get along with my sister. I always wondered, why is it so unfair? I would probably feel the same if I were in such a household. Then you appeared, seemingly without effort, having everything I wanted. You got along with your brother so naturally, and I resented you for it. That was the reason Susan had always been hostile towards me, even though we both have siblings. What's the difference between you and me? Siblings, even though I understood her reasoning, I still had to clear up a misunderstanding. Well, I don't know if it's okay to say this now, but my brother and I aren't actually blood related. What? Susan, who had been gazing up at the sky for a while, turned to face me for the first time. Her eyes were wide, possibly from surprise. Both my brother and I are adopted. Our parents are foster parents, and I could probably find out who my real parents are if I looked into it, but I've never felt the need to do so. Adopted. Both of you? She asked. Yeah, we have other siblings too. All of them adopted. It's kind of like a collection, but to me, they are what I call family. How come you get along so well with your brother, just like a real family, even though you're step-siblings? She asked. It wasn't all perfect from the start. We've been through a lot, but overcoming those challenges, we've built a bond stronger than that of real brothers. I had no idea about any of this back then. We weren't exactly in a position to share such stories, you and I. For those close to me, our family story was well known, but for Susan, who was unaware, it must have been quite a shock. After hearing my story, Susan looked down, her expression filled with deep thought. I'm really the worst. Being in such a privileged position, and yet harboring envy without knowing the full story, taking out my frustrations on you. I'm as bad as they say. She suddenly seemed to lose her confidence, which took me by surprise. Hey, don't get so down all of a sudden. You're scaring me. I'm just an attractive girl. Anyway, it seemed my words struck a nerve, but it also revived her spirit as she glared at me. I'm always told I'll be fine on my own. That's what all you guys say. I'm just a woman unloved by her family or anyone else. While I felt a bit of empathy for her self-deprecation, I sighed in relief when I noticed someone in the corner of my eye. That's not true. Look, there's someone who cares about you right over there. Following my words and gaze, Susan noticed a middle-aged woman standing a short distance away. The woman, named Dorothy, had been a longtime housekeeper at Susan's home. She could be considered Susan's second mother, worried about her after her family stopped visiting and came to take care of her during her hospital stay. She's a good person. She always asks me to take good care of you. Maybe you should consider her your parent, even if you're not related by blood. There you go, saying careless things again. When I made such a casual remark, Susan raised her voice in response. Then, standing up, she quickly walked towards Dorothy. Seeing Susan and Dorothy greet each other from afar, I waved back at them enthusiastically. To an outsider, their easy and unreserved relationship might indeed appear to be that of a true mother and daughter. For someone like me, who grew up without parents, the concept of blood relation seems trivial. If there's mutual respect and affection, akin to that of a parent and child, that's what I consider family. As I absent-mindedly watched Susan and Dorothy enter the ward, the sound of the hospital's intercom system reached my ears. It's likely Emily is looking for me again. With a sense of resignation, I started walking as if to follow the two of them. I need to do my best as a doctor to ensure they can continue to enjoy their close relationship. Salary thieves who play on their computers will be fired. Despite the fact that I am the lone engineer in the company, my superior, Charles, announced my termination. He must have been angry with me for always looking at my computer screen. But I chose to give his wish because I had already been thinking about quitting this firm with such a terrible boss. I get it. I said, I'll gather my belongings and depart from the organization. I packed up my things and headed out, but Charles had no idea that something terrible was going to happen to him. I'm 30 years old, and my name is Kevin. I am the company's only engineer at the moment. I consequently spend a large portion of my day staring at computer displays. Charles, the department manager and my supervisor, however, wasn't happy about it. Stop tinkering with your computer, Kevin, and get tea or coffee for everyone. As usual, his rage flared and he yelled at me, "You're so inconsiderate." I was used to this kind of treatment. I get it. I said, "I'll bring some tea or coffee right away." I sighed and forced myself to look away from the screen before making my way to the break room. My coworkers were too preoccupied to notice our conversation. Charles, meantime, grinned and was obviously amused by my lack of protest. I walked out of the office, ignoring him. I was absorbed in my thoughts as I was making tea and coffee in the break room. Despite my enthusiasm for my work, I found it difficult to maintain my motivation due to the lack of recognition. I had previously thought about leaving, but as I was the only engineer in our tiny business, there would be a huge increase in bugs and mayhem if I left. I would immediately quit this company if there were someone to take my position. I stayed out of fear for my coworkers because Charles was the only one aiming for me. I let out a long sigh, frustrated at my own helplessness. The coffee and tea were ready when I looked. I felt a lot of weight on my feet as I carried the tray back to the office. I couldn't bring myself to complain about Charles to the higher-ups, even though I was tired of his snark. Charles, the prestigious senior manager, and I, a mere engineer, were clearly different. Upon first glance, it was clear who would be regarded seriously. I sighed deeply once more, feeling dejected. My life took an unexpected turn one day. It took place on my way home from work the following day. As usual, I went to the convenience store for dinner because I didn't have a partner or a wife to prepare it for me. "Hey, are you Kevin? It's been a while." As I was exiting the store, I heard a voice I recognized. Mark, a high school classmate I was close to, was standing there when I turned around. "Mark, it has been a long time. Wow. How are you?" Astonished, I said. "Yes, it has. You appear to be doing well as well. I never imagined that I would see you here." Mark approached me, clearly happy about our unexpected reunion. It had been years since we last saw each other, and I was just as delighted. If I remembered correctly, Mark had transferred to a branch office in another state about 5 years ago. I'm the one who's surprised. "Didn't you transfer to a branch office out of state?" I asked. "I did, but I just got transferred back to the headquarters recently. What about you? Still at the same job?" "Yeah, I've been working as an engineer there all this time," I said. As I spoke, the thought of Charles crossed my mind, and I instinctively averted my gaze. I wasn't sure what Mark made of my reaction, but he quickly changed the subject. "Hey, how about we catch up properly over dinner tomorrow evening? It's been ages since we've had a drink together." He mimed holding a beer mug, flashing me a big grin. It was impossible to say no. Of course, I replied eagerly. Our offices were next to each other, so we agreed to meet after work in front of the buildings. You better show up. I'll be waiting, Mark said, securing the appointment. He waved at me before leaving. His sociable personality, unchanged since high school, still shone brightly. Seeing Mark brought back nostalgic memories, and I couldn't help but smile. Waving back, I also set off on my way home. Hey Kevin, what do you mean by leaving on time without doing any overtime? The next evening, just as I was wrapping up work, Charles called out to me with a scowl. I turned around to see him glaring daggers at me. It was clear he wasn't happy that I was leaving on time. Normally, he would complain about how useless I was and tell me to leave early, so why was he stopping me today? Maybe it was because I kept glancing at the clock. It's too late to regret that now, I thought. I finished all my tasks for the day, I said. Then help me or someone else with their work. Don't think you can leave on time just because you've been lazing around on your computer all day, he snapped. Sensing he was about to force overtime on me, I mustered up my courage. I actually have plans tonight, so I'll be leaving now, I said firmly. What? Hey, wait a minute. Ignoring Charles's protests, I dashed out of the office. I had made sure to finish all my tasks to avoid any chance of being tied down by overtime, especially because of my plans with Mark. Even so, having to work overtime felt utterly unfair. I couldn't help but feel exasperated by Charles, who relentlessly piled on work without a second thought. When I stepped outside the company and looked back, there was no sign of Charles following me. I'd deal with the fallout tomorrow if I had to. For now, it couldn't be helped. Kevin, you made it. I'm so glad. Mark greeted me enthusiastically when we finally met up. We decided to head to a nearby pub for dinner. I couldn't remember the last time I'd gone to a pub with anyone, let alone enjoyed the company of a friend. So, let me cut to the chase. Did something happen at work? After about an hour of chatting and eating, Mark suddenly asked the question out of the blue. Mark continued, cutting in further as I stared at him in wide-eyed surprise. You seemed fine, but when you showed up earlier, you were out of breath, like you'd been running. That's not like you, so I figured something might have happened. The concern in his eyes made my chest ache. I hadn't said anything, yet he'd noticed something was off. I felt guilty for worrying him. It's nothing major, really, I replied. After hesitating for a moment and lowering my gaze, I decided to confide in Mark. I told him about my strained relationship with my boss, Charles, and how I didn't feel fulfilled in my current job. Mark listened attentively, showing genuine concern. I see. In that case, here's an idea. Why don't you come work at my company? Huh. At your company? After hearing everything, Mark made such a surprising proposal. I was shocked. I never imagined receiving a recruitment offer from our rival company next door. We're short-staffed too, honestly. But with your skills as an engineer, I think you'd be a great addition. I'll talk to my boss about it, so please think it over. At the very least, I'll make sure you're offered better terms than your current situation. Mark added that he wouldn't pressure me for an immediate answer. Our dinner ended after that. We had already exchanged contact information, and he asked me to let him know once I made a decision. Even as I headed home, I was in a daze, knowing I might never encounter another opportunity as good as this. Still, what weighed on my mind was the state of the company I'd leave behind. The workload from endless bugs would fall entirely on me, as no one else in my company was capable of handling them. With that in mind, I couldn't decide right away, but the moment of reckoning came sooner than I expected. The next morning, when I arrived at work, I saw Charles standing near the office door with a scowl, arms crossed. My heart sank. As soon as he spotted me, he stormed over with a face like a demon. Kevin, you had the nerve to defy a direct order from your manager yesterday. But I had plans yesterday. There was nothing I could do. I can stay late today if needed, though. I replied cautiously. Overtime wasn't mandatory, but Charles probably saw me staring at my computer screen all day as laziness, which clearly irritated him. Caught off guard by his authoritative manner, I tried to explain. Charles smirked, as if he'd been waiting for that very reply. Don't bother staying late anymore. A slacker like you, glued to a computer screen all day, is fired. The sudden announcement of my firing made me raise my voice in disbelief. Fired? Huh. The other staff, arriving at the office, overheard the exchange and turned their attention to us, whispering among themselves. Rather than intervening, they seemed too intimidated by Charles's authority to say a word. No one stood up for me or tried to stop him. Was this justifiable? Had I been dismissed for simply working at my desk all day? I couldn't help but think so, though it was just my interpretation. Finally, I decided not to argue with him. After all, I was planning to quit anyway. Understood. I'll pack my things and leave, I said. Good. That'll be a big help. Honestly, it was so frustrating having someone like you around, just staring at a computer screen all day. Charles replied mockingly, adding insult to injury with a laugh. I bowed my head and returned to my desk to gather my things. Whatever happened after this, it was no longer my problem. Charles, satisfied with himself, watched me pack with a smirk intact. I was sure that after I left, he would report to the president, Mr. Underwood, with various excuses about my resignation. After finishing, I walked out of the office without a word. I glanced back briefly after leaving the building, but as expected, no one followed me. If anything, it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. As I walked away without hesitation, my eyes drifted toward the rival company next door, and I froze. In my confrontation with Charles, I had completely forgotten about Mark's offer. I pulled out my phone from my suit pocket and opened Mark's contact info. He had said I could call any time, but would now be okay. After a moment's hesitation, I made up my mind and dialed Mark's number. Meanwhile, Charles was visiting the president's office to report my dismissal. What is it? Let's hear it, Mr. Underwood asked. Well, Kevin, who was part of my team, submitted his resignation today. I've come to deliver his resignation letter on his behalf, Charles said confidently, handing over the letter. However, the letter wasn't written by me. It was a forgery Charles had penned himself. While he could declare my dismissal all he wanted, Charles lacked the authority to officially terminate me. So he decided to exploit my absence, framing the situation as if I had voluntarily resigned. Charles was confident that the disappearance of a single employee wouldn't be enough to change Mr. Underwood's mind. Kevin resigned? That's absurd. Surely you tried to stop him, didn't you, Charles? Charles was stunned as he watched Mr. Underwood's face turn pale upon hearing about my resignation. He hadn't expected such a reaction and fumbled for an excuse. Of course I did. I tried my best to convince him, but his decision was firm, and I couldn't change his mind, Charles stammered. Mr. Underwood, showing no suspicion toward Charles's act of faint regret, immediately took out his phone to call me. Seeing this, Charles began to sweat nervously, realizing his lie might be exposed. Please don't answer his call, he silently pleaded. No, I answered. Charles, why don't you try calling him as well? Charles felt a brief sense of relief when I didn't answer the call, but it was short-lived as Mr. Underwood urged him to try contacting me again. Feeling displeased and irritated by the suggestion, Charles couldn't hide his frustration. Mr. Underwood, why are you so determined to stop him? Honestly, our company will be fine without him. You wouldn't understand, but Kevin has been protecting our systems from bugs. You shouldn't say things so carelessly. Charles's face flushed bright red after being called out by Mr. Underwood. It seemed he utterly despised me, even in my absence, for causing him such embarrassment. While Mr. Underwood hurriedly dialed my number again, Charles ground his teeth in frustration. He appeared humiliated, realizing that I was more valued than him despite his position as a senior manager. "Mr. Underwood, there's an emergency. Please come quickly." At that moment, a female colleague appeared suddenly, looking unusually flustered. Sensing something was wrong, Mr. Underwood hurried to the location she was leading him to. Charles quickly followed, only to find that the female colleague was leading them to his department. "Several of our computers have started experiencing bugs, and we can't resolve them." About 100 bugs had cropped up across staff systems, leaving everyone in a state of panic. Some staff couldn't send critical data to clients, while others found their systems completely frozen. "We can't get anything done like this, Mr. Underwood. If we don't send this data by the end of the day, we'll be in serious trouble." Staff turned to Mr. Underwood, one after another, desperate for help. Seeing the chaos, Mr. Underwood could only hold his head in his hands. Charles, witnessing the disaster he had caused, finally realized the gravity of his actions. His face turned as pale as a sheet. What? How did it come to this? As Mr. Underwood buried his head in frustration, Charles frantically tried calling me again, but I still didn't answer. By then, I was already in contact with Mark at the rival company and had no intention of returning the call. Charles began to grow suspicious, realizing I might be ignoring him on purpose. His frustration boiled over. He's deliberately ignoring my calls. A colleague, watching Charles yell into his phone, couldn't help but speak up. "Well, of course. You told him he was fired earlier, didn't you?" "What did you just say?" Mr. Underwood whipped around to face the employee, his expression filled with disbelief. Charles, panicking, shook his head vigorously. "No, I don't remember saying that." "Don't bother lying, Charles. I wasn't the only one who saw it. Everyone here heard your conversation with Kevin." Hearing those words, Charles glanced around the department and noticed the harsh stares from the employees. It seemed they realized that the series of bugs appearing after I left the company were likely due to their decision to drive me out. Things were getting worse for Charles, and his panic was palpable. Mr. Underwood confronted him. "What's the meaning of this, Charles? You just told me earlier that Kevin voluntarily submitted his resignation, didn't you?" "There's a deeper reason for that," Charles stammered, making excuses. Mr. Underwood finally lost his temper. "How dare you act without my authorization? Go and bring Kevin back immediately." "Ah, yes, sir." Under the scathing reprimand, Charles bolted out of the office. When his calls went unanswered, he decided to head to my house to persuade me in person. But I was one step ahead of him. "That Charles is banging on your door right about now," said Mark, who had just joined me after receiving my call earlier. We were at Mark's house. After being fired by Charles, I had contacted Mark, who was off work, and he had invited me over. Honestly, just imagining that is pretty funny. I couldn't help but laugh at his comment because it probably wasn't far from the truth. Judging by the incessant calls from both Mr. Underwood and Charles on my phone, it was easy to imagine the scene. I explained the situation to Mark, and he allowed me to stay at his place tonight. This was to ensure that neither Mr. Underwood nor Charles would find out where I was. "My boss was thrilled to hear about you. He's arranged for an interview tomorrow." "Really? That's incredible. I can't thank you enough for all you've done." Having decided to accept Mark's previous recruitment offer, I had asked to interview with his company. Mark, understanding the circumstances, immediately contacted his boss, who quickly approved the plan. "I didn't think they'd make a decision so quickly, but we're all overjoyed to have you join us. Stay here as long as you like, not just tonight." "Thanks, Mark. I mean it. You've done so much for me." We laughed together as we said that. The moment felt just like our high school days, unchanged by time. I couldn't help but feel, from the bottom of my heart, that friends are truly invaluable. Apparently, Mark's company already had 2 engineers like me. With me as the third, it would ease the workload and allow everyone to take more breaks. No wonder they wanted to finalize my hire quickly. For me, the thought of having colleagues who understood my work was a huge relief. I had always been the only engineer, with no one to share the load or understand my challenges. To top it off, I didn't want to be told again that I'm a salary thief playing on a computer. After the interview, I was officially hired by the rival company and began working alongside the other engineers. The new job was nothing like my previous one. My skills were respected, my salary was higher, and I was finally satisfied. Although Mark was in a different department, my days were far more fulfilling. I doubted Charles or anyone from my old company could imagine I was now working right next door. Rumors reached me that their systems were plagued with bugs, rendering the computers unusable. They couldn't recover. Their data was lost, deadlines were missed, and they suffered contract cancellations one after another. Eventually, the staff began submitting mass resignations. As for Charles, he apparently showed up at my house, but since I wasn't home, he couldn't find me. Frustrated, he returned to the office, where he faced even more scolding from Mr. Underwood. Later, it was revealed that Charles had forged my resignation letter, leading to his immediate dismissal. He probably never imagined he'd be the one getting fired. Stripped of his pride, Charles left the company in disgrace. Being the only failure in a family of elites, Charles faced relentless criticism from his relatives and was ultimately disowned. Shunned by the industry, he scraped by with part-time jobs, trying to survive. Meanwhile, the company itself couldn't recover. Without enough staff or a way to resolve the bugs, it went bankrupt 1 month later. At my new workplace, I was finally finding a renewed sense of purpose in life. The mistreatment I had endured at my old job now felt like a distant memory. "You're so much brighter now than when we reconnected," Kevin Mark said with a warm smile as he looked at me. Recently, I hadn't noticed the change myself, but he was probably right. Now, I get to do the work I love every day alongside my colleagues. All of this is thanks to Mark for inviting me to join his company. If I hadn't reconnected with you, Mark, I doubt I'd be where I am today. Thank you again. With gratitude in my heart, I resolved to keep pushing forward in my work. If dedicating myself to my job could be my way of repaying Mark, then I vowed to continue doing so with all my strength.